What's going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite Reebok shoes in 2024 for cross training and lifting. So in this video, I'll discuss how I like to use each shoe, discuss their pros, cons, and sizing, jump around, everything is timestamped down below, but basically use this as a buyer's guide if you're looking into Reebok shoes. But all that said, let's dive into the first shoe. All right, so the first model I want to discuss is the Reebok Nano X4. And so when you think of Reebok training shoes, this is generally what's going to come up, especially if you're searching around online. It's kind of their flagship cross-training shoe for doing a little bit of everything. So who is the Nano X4 going to be best for? This is going to be best for the individual who likes to do a little bit of lifting, CrossFit, cross-training, and even some short runs on a weekly basis. It's a good shoe for tackling a little bit of everything, and it's more of a premium training shoe from Reebok. Now, three pros that come along with the Nano X4 is number one, it has a good degree of stability for lifting purposes. So if you want a training shoe that has good density through the midsole, this can be a great option to look into. We have the Reebok Float Ride Energy Foam that runs throughout the shoe. It has a more medium density feel. I have deadlifted over 500 pounds in the shoe without any issues, and it does a really good job at giving you nice stability under heavy weights. The second pro that comes along with the shoe is the lift and run chassis system. So this is a feature that's been new in the Nano X3 and Nano X4, and I think it adds to the shoe's versatility overall. And so this is the TPU wrap right here, but basically there's a dome and plate underneath here, and so it has like a dome-like feature when you're not lifting on it, but when you lift and press into the heel, it compresses, and it's designed to give you a bit of versatility blended with stability when you're lifting, running, etc. Or basically think like doing a CrossFit WOD where you're lifting and then transitioning into a short run. I like this feature. I think it does add a nice degree of versatility, and I like that they reworked it in the Nano X4 and the Nano X3. The TPU came up higher. It could feel kind of chunky at times. The third thing to like with the Nano X4 is the upper security and the outsole grip. So this model does a really good job at locking your foot down. So if you're doing a lot of side-to-side work or athletic style training, the shoe does a good job, and this outsole gives you good grip on different surfaces. So again, it's kind of like that fail-safe shoe for somebody who does a bit of everything. Now, two cons that come along with the Nano X4. So number one, it's not the widest shoe, and it does have a bit of arch. So if you have flat feet, I'm telling you now, steer clear of the Nano X4. Very rarely does it work for folks with wider flat feet. And then also the toe box does have a pretty aggressive taper. They have brought in the toe boxes of the last few iterations. I don't know why Reebok is making these shoes narrower, but they used to have a wider toe box, and if that's what you're expecting, the older Nanos will not feel like the Nano X4. The second con that comes along with the shoe is it does take a bit of time to break in, so expect a 1 to 2 week break-in period. It's not the most flexible Nano on the market. If you were a fan of the 10 or the X and below, those shoes I thought had a lot more flexibility. Since then, the Nanos keep getting a little bit stiffer and a bit more generalist with their construction, so definitely for folks who love the older Nanos and they might be considering the Nano X4, keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to sizing, I would say true to size is going to be the call for most folks. I have a normal arch and an E to double E width foot. This shoe fits pretty true to size. It doesn't run as long as the Nano X3 did, which was a little bit more variable with the sizing. Now that said, again, this model does have some arch and it does have a pretty aggressive taper through the toe box. So for my folks who have a 3E width foot or even a 2E and a very blocky toe box, steer clear of the shoe. It's going to likely feel too snug. And if you don't like any arch in your shoes, you'll also want to pass on this model. The next model I want to cover is the Reebok Nanoflex TR2. Now, this is a slightly older shoe. However, there's a lot of stock still in this model and it's often marked down. So I wanted to include this shoe in this list because it's repetitively really solid and it has a really good budget-friendly price point. Now, who is this shoe going to be best for? So if you want a shoe for lifting, CrossFit, and cross-training, but you don't feel like spending on the Nano X4 and you want a solid shoe that's going to cost well under $100, that's where the shoe is going to live. So three pros that I have with the shoe is number one, it's incredibly well-rounded for the price. And so generally folks have messaged me over the last, I would say few months alone that they have found this shoe for like 30 to 50 bucks. And I feel like if you could find this shoe for that price point, you will really like the performance of it for all of those verticals. It is sneaky strong in the gym for a very fair price. The second thing to like with this shoe is the midsoles, despite not being the more premium EVA used in the Nano X4, does a really good job with stability and responsiveness. So it does have a bit more flexibility through the toe box in my opinion compared to the Nano X4, especially right out of the box, and it's dense enough to support your heavier sessions. So if you want that shoe that does give you a nice blend of poppiness for jump rope, conditioning sessions, plyos, etc., but then can support like 400, 500 pound lifts, this can be a great option to look into. And the third pro with this shoe is it has a decent level of ankle support and upper security despite being a more budget-friendly option. So generally speaking, when you get more budget-friendly shoes from different companies, especially big brands, they usually skimp out on some of the structure of the upper and then also does the security of the upper and the materials. This model's overlays and textile upper does a good job of locking the foot down, and you get a bit of boot structure back here with this TPU wrap around the heel. Now, two cons that come along with the shoe. Number one, if you have flat feet, you'll want to pass on the shoe. It also has an arch, and that's honestly going to be a theme with most of the training shoes in the Reebok video today. It's just not going to be your best brand regarding training shoes if you have a flat foot and you don't like arch in your shoes. The second con that comes along with this shoe is it doesn't have a tongue gusset, so the tongue can move and slide at times. And so if you're doing side to side work and you don't get this tongue to lay flat or your shoes aren't very secure, it can be a little annoying and slide, but honestly, it's kind of a nitpick and it doesn't really hold back the overall performance of this shoe. It's just one of those little things that I just wish wasn't a thing in this model. Now, when it comes to sizing, I would say go true to size for most folks. Now, this model's toe box I actually think feels wider than the Nano X4, so I do think it'll fit a wider range of foot anatomies, but again, this model does have arch, so flat feet may want to steer clear of this shoe. All right, the next model I'm going to cover is the Reebok Nano Gym. So consider this shoe more of the budget-friendly cousin and more generalist cousin of the Reebok Nano X4. Now, who is this shoe going to be best for? I think if you're a beginner or you're an intermediate in the gym and you want that model from Reebok that kind of rivals the Nike Free Metcon 6 in the sense that it's a bit more HIIT and cross-training focused, that's where the Nano Gym is going to excel. Now, three things to like with the Nano Gym is number one, this model's EVA foam midsole has a lot more flexibility through the toe box compared to the Nano X4, and it's a bit more bouncy and plush. And so if you want a shoe with a bit more responsiveness and a softer ride to it for your cross-training sessions, HIIT, or classes, the Nano Gym can be a great option. The second pro with this shoe is it has a good level of ankle support. So we have a higher boot in this shoe, it lips up, and it has a decent structure to it. And so if you're somebody who likes a bit more ankle support for side-to-side work or any form of plyometric, that's where the shoe can also excel. The third thing to like with the shoe is if you have a narrower foot and a little bit of arch, and you like that for your HIIT training. So with a lot of jumping and whatnot, you like a bit of arch support, this can be a great option to look into. It's going to give you a nice wall here on the medial side, and the toe box taper is going to lock your foot down really well if you find that you're typically swimming in your shoes. Now, two cons that come along with the Nano Gym. Number one, the shoe's higher heel to toe drop can feel really interesting for training, and that might just be a me thing, but I know other commenters have also expressed this, but essentially this model's heel to toe drop sits at 9 millimeters. That means the heel is sitting up pretty high compared to the forefoot. And so for certain workouts, I actually felt a little bit more pitched forward in the shoe than other Reebok training shoes. And more specifically, when doing like kettlebell swings, kettlebell snatches, think anything where I'm hinging and trying to be explosive, I felt a little bit forward in this shoe. Now, the forward nature can be good for certain workouts, but not everything. And if you like a flatter foot position, you'll want to consider that in this shoe. The second con that I have with this model is, despite it being great for narrower feet and for folks who want arch support, it is going to be a complete turnoff for wider feet and flatter feet. So if you fall into those categories, trust me, the Nano Gym is not going to fit for you, and just avoid doing the whole exchange and return process because this model is just not going to work for your feet. Now, when it comes to sizing, I think most athletes and lifters should be safe going true to size. However, once again, if you have an exceptionally wider foot, so I would say a foot width that is wider than a 2E width or a flat foot, you'll want to pass on the shoe, but for everyone else, true to size will be the call. The next shoe I want to cover is the Reebok Nano Unknown. Now, this is a more limited edition release, so it will likely only be relevant for this 2024 buyer's guide, but this model is interesting because it works really well for cross-training and lifting, but it's not going to give you the same degree of versatility. But if you do want that shoe for those asks, but you also want a higher boot and a shoe that can look a little bit more casual for daily wear, that's where the shoe is going to excel. So three things to like with the Nano Unknown is number one, obviously the boot. If you like high top shoes, I think you will enjoy this shoe regarding its structure and how it feels in the ankle. You have a lower cup in this model and the upper is a little bit more loose up here. So if you are somebody that wants that high top shoe for cross training, that's where I think these can excel. They don't feel as chunky as some of the other high top models out there. So for example, like the Noble Outwork and Impact high tops, they can feel a little bit too snug at times if you really lace them. And that's where I think this shoe can excel. The second pro with this model is the lift and run chassis system blended with the Float Right Energy Foam midsole. This shoe does a good job at giving you a nice range of stability for heavy lifting, but then also some versatility for short runs and whatnot. I would say on the spectrum of high top shoes regarding versatility, the Nano Unknown is one of the better options out there because of these two features, and they feel very similar to the Nano X3. So if that was a model you love, then I think you will resonate with the shoe and enjoy it. The third pro that I have with the Nano Unknown, and this is just kind of like a me probably specific thing, but if you want this shoe for daily wear specifically, and you like to to leave your high top shoes looser with the tongue not completely going awry and sliding around. So you want a shoe to just slide on and have a casual look. This can be a good option to go with. The tongue gusset in this model holds the tongue pretty still. And so I wear mine like this, a little bit looser. And that way I can just pop my foot in, wear them casually, and I don't have to mess with them every time. So it's a little thing, but it's a quality of life tweak and feature that I think really improves this shoe's performance for a daily wear context. Now, two cons that I have with the Nano Unknown. Number one, narrowness and the arch. It is just very off-putting, I think, for certain foot anatomies. So again, similar to all the other training shoes in this video, if that is you, don't buy this model. It's not gonna feel very comfortable. And if you like the Nano X Unknown, this model is not gonna feel like that shoe. I had super high hopes that it would, and it doesn't, and it kind of bummed me out when I got them. The second con that I have with this shoe is the TPU layer here with the lift and run chassis system. It kind of digs into the foot at times. And so with this lighter upper, it's great for versatility, but what I found sometimes is that this could actually dig into your foot when you're breaking the shoe in. And so if you do have any spillover on the medial side of the shoe, this can be very off-putting and very uncomfortable. And that's also why I say for flat feet, just don't even think about this model, to be quite honest with you. Now, when it comes to sizing, I would say go true to size for foot anatomies that are from narrow to an E to double E with foot. I would say that this shoe also works best for folks with normal arches or slightly higher arches, just because if you have flat feet, I think you will push in that TPU layer, and the arch is gonna feel pretty off-putting for your foot anatomy. All right, so if you want a shoe for weightlifting specifically, squats, and even maybe quad bias variations, depending on what you're doing in the gym, the Reebok Legacy Lifter 3 is kind of the more premier weightlifting shoe right now from Reebok. Now, when will you use this shoe? If you are a weightlifting athlete or somebody who wants an elevated heel shoe for squats, that's where this shoe is going to excel. This is not going to be the shoe that you wear for full sessions in the gym. So if you're brand new to weightlifting shoes, you're going to want to go with a training shoe on top of this, because again, this is just not going to be that comfortable for anything outside of those very specific contexts. Now, 3 pros that come along with the Reebok Legacy Lifter 3. Number one, I really like the TPU midsole in this shoe from an overall stability context. So whether you are squatting big weight or catching big weight and clean and jerks and snatches, this model is gonna have no issues with compression. It feels very similar to every TPU Reebok to date, so Legacy Lifter 2, etc. So this model is very consistent with that. And I also like that this TPU from the heel actually comes up and wraps around the heel as well. It gives you a nice planted feeling when you're catching weight. The second thing to like with the Reebok Legacy Lifter 3 is the overall upper security. So in this shoe, you have a heavier leather upper with textile overlays, and then you also have the Reebok pump system here. So you could pump the tongue up and it actually pushes down a little bit more and gives you additional security on top of this midfoot strap. So from an upper security standpoint, the shoe does a really good job. And the third pro that I have with this model is that it has a nice grip to the outsole. So if you're training on rubber gym floors or wooden platforms, this shoe should give you a nice level of traction. Now, 2 cons that I have with the Legacy Lifter 3. Number one, it runs really hot. With the heavier upper of this shoe and how we have that heavier TPU plate, it just has a heavier build and it's not gonna have the most breathability. And then also too, because that TPU plate runs so far up here, it does give this shoe a much heavier feel, which is pretty stereotypical of the Legacy Lifter shoe line. The 1 was very clunky and anchor-like, the 2 was also pretty heavy, and the 3 is no different. The second con that comes along with this shoe is the toe box width. So this is a pretty snug weightlifting shoe. I don't think it's gonna give a lot of width to folks who have 3E plus foot width. Even with my 2E foot, I find that this shoe can feel pretty snug if I'm wearing slightly thicker socks. So definitely keep that in mind if you have a wider foot. Now, when it comes to sizing of this shoe, true to size for most foot anatomies, again, if you have a 2E plus width foot or wider, you might want to tread lightly with this model, or at least buy them from a retailer that you can easily return them in the event they run a little bit too snug. And even if you size up a half size, I'm not convinced you're gonna have enough room in this model's toe box. The final shoe I want to discuss is the Reebok Lifter PR3. Now, we can also rope in the PR2 here because there are still some sizes out there, and both of these shoes are very similar. Consider these models the budget-friendly cousin of the Legacy Lifter. They're more of the cost-efficient weightlifting shoe from Reebok. Now, with this shoe, when will you want to wear it? So similarly for squats and weightlifting, and more specifically, I think if you're a beginner to weightlifting shoes, this can be a great option to look into because one, it has a better price point and a slightly lower heel. So if you've never squatted or trained with an elevated heel to the extent of a weightlifting shoe, this can be a good model to kind of ease you into that style of heel elevation. Now, 3 pros that come along with this model is number one, the price point. Generally, you could find this shoe from anywhere from like $80 to $120. And so if you want to save a little bit and get a really consistent weightlifting shoe, the PR2 and the PR3 can be awesome options to explore. The second pro that comes along with the shoe is its well-rounded performance. So despite being a more budget-friendly weightlifting shoe, I don't feel like it feels necessarily super cheap like some of the other options out there. So for example, if you go through Amazon and pick up some of the Nordic lifting options, even the Savaleos at times, they can feel pretty dang cheap. This model feels, I think, decent for the price point. It doesn't necessarily shout budget-friendly option. And when it comes to its performance, it does a really good job from a stability context, a break-in point, and a grip with the outsole. The third thing to like with the PR2 and PR3 is that they have a simple upper, but it's also really secure. So with this shoe, it does a decent job at locking your foot down, so spillover isn't really a big issue in these shoes. And with the single strap, it locks the midfoot down pretty well. And the shoe doesn't have as much of an aggressive taper through the midfoot and forefoot, so it actually feels a bit wider than the Legacy Lifter 3 as well, which is also a little perk here. Now, two cons that come along with this shoe. Number one, the strap can be weirdly short at times. So if you have a very high instep or a very voluminous foot, this strap can actually feel a little bit limiting at times. I wish that they had more surface area here and this Velcro was a little bit thicker. I don't really care for these numbers because generally your feet will vary from lift to lift, so it's not going to always be relevant in my opinion. And then the second con that comes along with the shoe is if you want a TPU midsole. So think when we're talking weightlifting shoes, you have like an EVA, so it's a very high density foam here versus the TPU. TPU is going to give you a bit more ground feedback. It's going to be a bit more snappy compared to the EVA. If that is something that you're after or just something you really enjoy with your weightlifting shoes, that would be something that you might want to consider with the PR2 and PR3. But I think that's going to be such a small subset of folks that it's not really a con against this shoe. It's just one of those preferences that could be a con for some, but it's not really a con regarding overall performance. Now, when it comes to sizing in this shoe, most athletes and lifters should be safe going true to size. 3E foot widths and wider, you might want to steer clear of this shoe, and this can be a decent option for flatter feet and slightly wider feet, so definitely a better, I think, wider option compared to the Legacy Lifter 3. All right, y'all, that was this video breaking down some of my favorite Reebok shoes in 2024. If you have additional questions on any of these shoes featured, or if you have additional questions for clarification, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.